Good afternoon and welcome to the March webinar, Producer Licensing Overview. My name is Diana Capes and I am filling in for Mary Ellen. We were having some technical issues, so thank you for your patience. But before introducing today's speaker, there are a couple housekeeping items that we need to address. This webinar is 1 hour in length and is being recorded. Within the next week, you can receive an email with a link to the recording and a post-webinar survey that we appreciate you completing. Please mute your microphone so focus stays on our speaker, and please put your questions in the chat box because we will be monitoring and posing them to the speaker on your behalf. Any unanswered questions need to be emailed to us at the email address that you see or already provided in the chat box. Today, we are happy to have Barb Gavitt, Vice President of Financial Services Product Development at AD Banker & Company. I know many of you already know who Barb Gavitt is. She's responsible for leading the strategic direction for insurance, securities, continuing education, and professional development. She is a past president on the board of directors and for the Securities and Insurance Licensing Association, and currently serves as the co-chair of SILA's Education and Training Subgroup, fondly known as SETS. She has been in the insurance education industry since 1991. Please join me in welcoming Barb back to our virtual webinar stage. Barb?
Thank you. Always a pleasure to be here. So basically, we're going to be speed dating today with producer licensing. So we had, like Diana said, we had a little bit of a glitch, so we'll try to get this started. So yeah, this is just going to be an overview of producer licensing. Diana, can you move to the next slide for me, please? Thanks. I love this movie. So yeah, there's a producer licensing basics course that will give you kind of a deeper understanding of producer licensing. But for this 45 minutes to an hour, we'll be just doing some highlights, and we'll just be talking about individual producer licensing, not business entities. All right, next slide, please. So exactly what you wanted to do for an afternoon after lunch is talk about the history of insurance, but I will make it quick and painless. If you're an insurance geek like I am, then you know these regulations and court cases by heart, but these are pretty notable. So talking about insurance regulation, Paul versus Virginia was the first notable court case that determined that insurance was state regulated. You know, Paul was an insurance agent who was licensed in New York and wanted to sell in Virginia. And the Supreme Court decided that insurance was not interstate commerce and therefore not subject to federal regulations. So therefore it was state regulated. And that held for 75 years. And then in 1944, there was another court case, United States versus Southeastern Underwriters, also in Virginia by chance. And so the result of that court case was that the Supreme Court determined that insurance was sold across state lines, was considered interstate commerce, and was subject to federal regulation. So the ink was not even dry on this ruling when Congress passed the McCarran-Ferguson Act. So roughly 1 year later, and under the McCarran-Ferguson Act in 1945, this exempted the insurance industry from federal antitrust laws and stated that insurance was regulated by state law. So the NAIC was instrumental in getting the McCarran-Ferguson Act passed, and they basically created model laws that laid out plans for state regulations of insurance. So another notable regulation in 1999 was the Graham-Leach-Bliley Act. So part of the GLBA, even though it is famous for other things, part of it was actually passed to promote reciprocity in producer licensing requirements. A lot of people don't realize that. So basically the states were faced with two choices. Either a majority of the states could enact uniform producer licensing laws that are reciprocal with other states, which would have to happen by the year 2002, or the National Association of Registered Agents and Brokers, known as NARAB, would be created and national standards would be imposed, therefore superseding, state laws. So basically the NAIC and the states chose door number one, and the result of that was the Producer Licensing Model Act was adopted the next year. Now that doesn't mean that they met the requirements of the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, but it was a step in the right direction. Slide, please. Next slide. Diana, next slide. Thanks. Next, there we go. Thanks. All right, real quick, talking about the NAIC, National Association of Insurance Commissioners, which was established in 1871. So the NAIC is made up of the commissioners, also commissioners, directors, superintendents of all 50 states, including DC and 5 US territories. So the NAIC was established to assist in developing uniform policies to protect the public interest. In fact, they established the Reciprocal General Insurance Act. They also created like I just mentioned, the Producer Licensing Model Act, the PLMA, and then we'll also talk about the Uniform Licensing Standards, and they also developed the State Licensing Handbook and a whole slew of other things, which we don't even have time to talk. We're just going to be touching the tip of the iceberg with what the NAIC has done for the insurance industry. NIPR was also instrumental in helping with uniformity. So NIPR was established in 1996, National Insurance Producer Registry, which is a nonprofit arm of the NAIC. And they're responsible for streamlining producer licensing processes to help make them uniform. So they created the Producer Database, or the PDB, which is electronic insurance producer license and appointment information, and the NIPR Gateway, which links insurance departments and provides for electronic submissions of licensing information. They also have the attachment warehouse for background checks. So again, not doing either of these two justice, but just wanted to touch on, their contributions to producer licensing. Next slide, please. Okay, so talking about the Producer Licensing Model Act. So under the GLBA, they said, you have until 2002 in order to get your ducks in a row and have more reciprocity and uniformity. The majority of the states have to meet this. So Producer Licensing Model Act. And what is a Model Act? Basically, a Model Act is guideline legislation that states can adopt either in its entirety, or they can modify it to suit their specific situations. So the PLMA was adopted in 2000, but it was again amended in 2005. So this was adopted by the NAIC to meet, reciprocity demands. So the states in turn have to adopt either all or parts of the Producer Licensing Model Act, or modify it to meet their needs. I just took a snapshot of the table of contents just so you can see that these are all the topics that are included in the Producer Licensing Model Act. So the purpose of the scope, just one of the things was to govern the qualifications and procedures for the licensing of insurance producers. And there are other things that the PLMA was responsible for doing, but that was just a highlight. Also, the recommendation is that any current statute or regulation that is inconsistent with this act, the guidelines recommend that those statutes be repealed or amended. And again, the purpose was to promote uniformity. All right, so we're going to talk about some of the highlights of the Producer Licensing Model Act. All right, so, and again, we're not talking about everything under the PLMA, but just some of the highlights. So first of all, who needs to be licensed? All right, so, the PLMA defined, who needs to be licensed, and that is anybody who sells, solicits, or negotiates insurance. And in order to be licensed, they need to have a license and a specific line of authority. Also, it determines who is exempt or who does not need to be licensed. So exceptions to licensing. So pretty much officers, directors, executives, anyone who does clerical duties, underwriters, anyone who's marketing or advertising. And one of the key things is people who do not get paid commissions. So they are not going to fall under the requirements of being licensed. Application process and qualifications. So there are, uniform processes that were part of the PLMA. Types of licenses. So not only does this talk about the authority, and later on we'll talk about the major lines of authority and some limited lines of authority, but it also talks about other, licensing things. So this includes information that has to be included on a license, such as the licensee's name, address, what lines of authority they are authorized to sell in, the expiration date and renewal date of their license, what their license number is, and anything else that the commissioner determines they need to have included. It also talks about license lapse. So if they don't renew their license, the fact that they have the right to reinstate their license and 12 months to reinstate their license. And if they don't, they have to pay a fee to reinstate. Also that they have to notify the commissioner if they have a change of legal name or address within 30 days. So all of that is part of the licensing information under the PLMA. License denial, non-renewal, or revocation. So basically, this is a list of all of the things that you can't do. Basically, if it sounds bad, it is bad and you can't do it. So things like misrepresentation, forgery, stealing, failure to pay child support. So there's a whole host of things or unfair methods of competition that can cause a license to either be denied, not renewed, or a license to be revoked. Under appointments, so an appointment is registration with a state insurance department that a producer is acting on behalf of an insurer. So if a state requires appointments, and not all states have appointment requirements, there are procedures for notifying the commissioner at the time of licensing or time of application, and also at the time of termination. So, there are some standards that states will follow under appointments. So that's part of the PLMA. Next slide. Thanks. All right, so again, talking about uniformity and reciprocity, there's also a section here on non-resident licensing. So a lot of the things that we've talked about have to do with residents, but the PLMA does also deal with non-resident licensing, and that was also very specific under the GLBA that it include non-resident licensing. So a non-resident, of course, is somebody licensed in their home state that wants to also do business in states that they are not residents of. So a person is entitled to be a non-resident producer license, if they are currently licensed in good standing in their home state. And of course, they've paid money, so they've submitted a request to obtain a license, and they've submitted to the commissioner the same application that they submitted to their home state, or they've submitted a uniform application. And their home state awards non-resident producer licenses to residents of this state on the same basis. And that's where the reciprocity comes in. So it's sort of like a do unto others. So if we accept non-residents from your state, then you have to accept non-residents from our state. And what that does is it allows those non-residents to, get licensed without having to do any kind of pre-licensing or CE. It just allows them to be able to do business in each other's state. Next slide, please. Thanks. Okay, licensing qualification standards. All right, so the standards are minimum age 18, legal work authorization. So it is not required that you be a U.S. citizen, but you do have to have legal work authorization. And a high school diploma is not actually required. A lot of people don't realize this. Now, this might be a company requirement that you have a high school diploma, but it is not actually a state requirement. There are also pre-licensing education training standards for residents only. We're not talking about non-residents now. So this is also part of the uniform licensing standards, which we'll talk about in just a minute. Oh, sorry, we are talking about, we switched, my bad. So talking about uniform licensing standards, these are part of the Producer Licensing Model Act. And this is basically just an extension. So the producer education, pre-licensing education training standards do not require pre-licensing education. But there are 21 states that do require it. So if a state requires pre-licensing, then the uniform licensing standards require 20 hours per major line of authority, up to 40 hours for 2 major lines. So for example, life and health would require 40 hours. Property casualty, 40 hours. If it were life only, it would be 20. So there's no requirement that a state have pre-licensing, but if they do, the maximum requirement would be 40 for 2 major lines. States may not require additional pre-licensing education for non-resident applicants or non-resident producers who change their residency. So there are 21 states, like I said, that do require pre-licensing education. So again, not a requirement, but if they do, then they do need to meet those hours. And you know what? There are some states that are not uniform, you know, so there is no absolute uniformity, but you know, we're working there. We're making our way toward uniformity. All right, major lines of authority. So there are 6 major lines of authority: life, accident and health or accident and sickness, property, casualty, variable life and variable annuity, and personal lines. So a separate exam must be offered for major lines of authority, and states can offer combination exams. They can also waive testing for variable products. So in addition to these major lines of authority, there are also limited lines. There are 4 core limited lines. These include car rental, credit, crop, and travel. Pre-licensing or testing are not required for limited lines, but states can choose, if they want, to require an exam. There are also non-core limited lines. And non-core limited lines are for products where the nature of insurance offered is incidental to the product being sold. So for example, legal expense, pet insurance, or portable electronics would be examples of non-core limited lines. Again, no specific pre-licensing requirements there or CE, but states can impose requirements if they want. Next slide. All right. Additional uniform licensing standards, background checks. All right, so again, we're talking about resident applicants. All right, so standard background questions contained in the uniform application. Now again, these are standards. There are still some states that aren't uniform here, but you know, this is what the recommendation is. Also, states will run a check against the NAIC Regulatory Information Retrieval System, known as RIRS, and the State Producer Licensing Database. So the information that they can get from this is anything that is from any other governmental agency, also including FINRA. So if there are any, anything that has been submitted to the states, any criminal, violations or any violations in any other jurisdiction, then, a state insurance, commissioner can find out if there's been, anybody that's applying for insurance, that's been found, guilty of doing anything within another jurisdiction. Also, 1033 application. So 1033 under the Violent Crime Control Act establishes a ban on individuals who have been convicted of certain felony crimes involving dishonesty or breach of trust from working in the insurance industry. So they can apply to the commissioner for written consent to work. All right, so states will run a check against these and fingerprint a resident producer applicant and run a state and federal background check. So that's kind of the best case scenario. Or if the state lacks the authority to accept or receive data from the FBI, then they can conduct a statewide criminal history background check until it obtains authority. So right now there are 20 states currently that do not do fingerprinting and they don't have that authority. So I'm still working toward that uniformity. Next slide. All right, the appointment process. All right, so if required, states have to follow the uniform. It is recommended that states follow the uniform appointment process or the NIPR electronic appointment and termination process. So currently there are 8 states that do not file appointments. License renewal. All right, so licenses are perpetual, so that means that they are just continuous. However, there is still a renewal process. And so the Uniform Licensing Standards state that licenses are renewal biannually, which is every 2 years. And the standards are that they are renewal on the birth month or the actual date of birth, and that there are renewal fees, of course. Some states do require renewal applications. All right, also upon renewal, producers have to complete their continuing education. All right, so this is just talking about resident producers. So just talking again about that biennial compliance period, and the Uniform Licensing Standards state that they are required 24 hours, and that includes 3 hours of ethics, and that is for major lines of authority. So there are currently 10 states that are not uniform, believe it or not. So, you know, there's a couple that are kind of close, you know, a couple that have, you know, 48 hours every 4 years or 36 hours every 3 years. So they're trying to work. There's a couple of states that are like, nah, we're not even close. It's not like states don't want to be uniform, but also there are lobbyists in states that are kind of making it difficult, you know, for states to become compliant, or uniform. So I thought you guys would enjoy this picture of this little puppy. There are some states that require monitors or proctored exams. So I just thought this was, you know, maybe a question of if this was a disinterested third party. So I just thought that would put a little sunshine into your day. All right, so we talked about, you know, continuing education. So this is not part of the Uniform Licensing Standards, but there are also, you know, product specific training requirements. Annuity suitability best interest. So these are requirements that producers who sell certain products are required to obtain these certifications before they can sell these products. So we have annuity suitability and best interest requirements. So we are just in the tail end of the best interest. There's still just a couple states that haven't adopted any best interest requirements. I think we have DC and New Jersey that are still trailing, but we're almost there. Flood insurance training requirements, long-term care partnership. And then we have a couple states that have specific requirements. We have claims made training, Colorado's requirement, index products and Medicare, to Texas. And then coming soon in California, we'll have a requirement that becomes effective January 1 for non-term life insurance. So those are specific product certification courses that do have requirements. Now, those are also going to be eligible for CE requirements, but they're not specific for CE, they're specific for product training. Next. Okay, so we know that the NAIC is responsible for the Producer Licensing Model Act and also for the Uniform Licensing Standards. So another big thing that the NAIC is responsible for is the state licensing handbook. And basically it's a culmination of all of the things. So this was developed in 2009, but it was also updated in 2011, 2018, and 2020. And now it just becomes updated once there are certain chapters that need to be updated. So, there's a chapter for adjusters, there's a chapter for different types of products. And when those need updating, then they get updated. So the handbook provides framework for, to insurance departments administering a producer licensing program. And it does include information on the Producer Licensing Model Act and the Uniform Licensing Standards. There's also a model bulletin and FAQs. It provides guidelines and recommendations for the CE requirements, uniform criminal history, regulatory action background review, and professional licensing standards. So I did include a link here. So if there's a PDF of this presentation, then you should be able to just click on the link. But you can just do a Google search of the 2020 NAIC licensing handbook, and you'll go right to the page. And then there's a link to every single chapter. So you'll be able to, click on, anything that you want to be able to take a look at. All right, so I also did go through, and I this is something that SILA is really proud of. So there are some things that SILA was able to work with the NAIC to get adopted, which is actually included in the state handbook. Some, course guidelines. So these are guidelines, but they were adopted by the NAIC and they are included in the appendix of the state handbook. So we've got guidelines for classroom webinar, continuing education, standardized terms and definitions, pre-licensing, standardized terms and definitions, recommended guidelines for online courses, recommending guidelines for classroom, the CE reciprocity agreement and reciprocity uniform course filing form. So the SILA education and training subgroup did work closely with the uniform education working group to get these adopted. And these are all links that you can go to see these documents, and they've all been adopted by the NAIC. And so these are now, these are now guidelines that states can use when they're, it's pretty cool to be part of, the solution and working toward uniformity. So, if you're in the industry and you're wondering how you can get involved and how you can work, help work toward uniformity, there's a lot that you can do. There's kind of a hierarchy when it comes to the NAIC. So the producer licensing task force is kind of the top of, the producer licensing group, and they're part of the working group D. So you can go to the NAIC.org and you can actually look at all of the committees. And so, that's kind of the top of the hierarchy when it comes to producer licensing. And so underneath the producer licensing task force, so they actually do have meetings, and these are public meetings that you can join. The producer licensing uniformity working group is part of that. And I know that they're going to be working on the uniform application. And then also part of the task force is the Uniform Education Working Group. And they've got several things that they're working on, including talking about some of the approvable topics for continuing education and, pass rates and things like that. The SILA Education and Training subgroup, so that's the subgroup that I'm a co-chair of. So, we're working on class conduct topics, some CE topics. We've got a pre-licensing group that is also talking about pass rates and remote testing. And then the silent agent and carrier subgroup has a whole slew of topics as well. So if you're interested in getting involved in working on some topics that you can, help make a difference, these are some areas that you can get involved in that, you can help, make a difference. The SILA National Conference this year is in October, and a lot of the conference sessions will also be, talking about some of the topics that we've talked about, during today's session. So I think that's the last slide. Unfortunately, we did have some trivia questions and the polling isn't working. So I'm sorry, that was going to help take up some. Yes, if you can get those to work, let's do that. I was hoping
Let's see if we can make these things work here. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to launch the first question.
Okay, cool. I didn't know we were going to be able to get that to work.
Do you see the question?
Yes. All right. So here's our fun for you. Ed Helms represents Brown Star Insurance in what 2011 comedy film? Let's see if you guys know your trivia.
I'm not seeing any responses now. Is it kicking up? Everybody?
I can see it on the screen. Can you guys check your answers and hit submit?
I did respond and hit submit.
Yeah, I did.
Can you see the responses, Barb?
Let's see. Responses. I can't see the responses, but I can see people in the chat are saying that they submitted them.
Oh, wait, isn't this
The response, yeah, the response box did go away, so I don't know where it went.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so I'm going to end this one. See if we have results. Share results. Okay, here we go. Here we go. Did it show it?
It's sharing the results. So this was kind of a fun question, and I did this trivia question a long time ago at a Heartland chapter meeting. All of these movies have insurance components, and this particular movie was actually Cedar Rapids. So there is a insurance agent in all of these movies though, but this one was Cedar Rapids. So yeah, Ed Helms is the guy from The Office. So that one is, yes.
Very cool.
Okay, so there's one. We have, I think, 5 questions.
All right. So hold on a minute here. Let me go back up here. Get these off.
These were supposed to be strategically placed, but we're going to have fun anyway.
All right. Well, come on. Where did it go? Oops. Sorry, guys. This is definitely not working for me. It showed up and now it doesn't show up. Okay, let me try kick it off again here. Stop sharing. Go back. Okay, here we go. I'm going to launch a different one.
All right. Which of the following was created, passed, or adopted to encourage uniformity? You're going to hate me on this one. Or you're going to love me.
I just remember all these meetings about it over the years. Okay, should we end it and see what we got?
Go ahead and end it. So this was really a trick question because the answer is all of them. There was no all of the above. I just wanted to see what you guys would do. Yeah, so that was not fair. It was a trick question. I just wanted to see what you guys would do. So yes, all of them are correct. So you're all right.
Okay, those trick questions. Let's do another one now that I'm getting the hang of it.
What substance caused a flood on January 15th, 1919 in the north end of Boston that killed 21 people and several horses?
Oh, the horses. Is this where the glue factory came into play?
I don't know, but that's a good response, isn't it?
Should we end it now? Everybody still coming in?
You guys gotta be quick when Diana's running these polls. Yeah, go ahead.
You can't give it any thought.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Wow, you guys are good. It is molasses. I had to come up with some answers that were sticky. So yes, the answer is molasses. Yeah. The old molasses flood of 1919.
All right. So we're ready for, I think, the which one? How come it's not letting me launch? 6 items, polls. Was so good. I think we've had 3 questions, right? Are you seeing it?
Yeah.
No, not yet.
Well, it's not letting me launch anymore now. It says we've now launched it. Oh, come on. Let me try it. Going down to the next one. Mm. Barb, I'm sad to say it's not going to let me launch anymore.
Okay, then I will read it and you guys put it in the chat what you think the answer is. Okay. So this one says the oldest insurance company in the United States, the Philadelphia Contribution Ship, was first organized in 1752 by what famous person? Thomas Jefferson, John Hancock, Benjamin Franklin, or Alexander Hamilton? You guys
Look
are
at all
all
those
too good.
responses coming in.
Yes. I did stump some of you because it was one of the founding fathers.
Looks like Ben Franklin's the majority.
It is Ben Franklin. Yes. Yes. But I'm glad I picked some answers that got some of you stumped. Yes. All right. So, and so the last one is my favorite. All right. Gosh, I'm so bummed that we couldn't put this on the screen. Okay, you guys.
Sorry, but yeah,
here's
more.
Here's the last one. I think you guys are really going to like this one. All right. On what sitcom does the main character opt for the rental car insurance and teases that he's going to beat the hell out of this thing because they failed to keep his reservation? Is it Seinfeld, King of Queens, Everybody Loves Raymond, or Curb Your Enthusiasm?
Looks like most people are checking Seinfeld.
It is Seinfeld. I have lots of Seinfeld friends.
Yeah, you've got a good audience there.
You can take my reservation, but you can't keep my reservation. That's his famous line. Oh, that was so much fun, you guys.
Barb, I have closed caption. Can you hear me? Just shake your head. I have audio issues. I was the problem, everybody. There is a question in chat right up towards the beginning.
One from Tina? Yes.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if you addressed it. I just wanted to make sure
no,
you did.
Thank you. No, I saw that and I'm going back to that and I cannot answer, but I'm going to see if somebody else can. And I don't even know if there is an answer, but yes, there is a question about the 1033 waiver. Scrolling. Let's see. And Diana, maybe you know the answer. I don't know, but it is so far up here. Okay, so it talks about the 1033 waiver. It says, so must an applicant get a 1033 waiver in each state in which he or she wants to be licensed or is licensed? If so, is there any movement to make that a national form, understanding each state can make its own decision on whether or not to approve the license or revoke the license? So I do not know the answer to that.
Well, we have some people. Yes.
I know I've got some some insurance nerd friends down here. So no, only the resident state can deny the licensure depart. Okay, so I think the question is there, who do they submit it to? Is there a national? Do they have to submit it to every state? Okay, so they only submit it to the resident state. Is that what you're saying?
Just
States,
one, yeah.
their home state
Okay.
should issue a 1033, and then each non-res state can decide to grant a license or deny. Okay. All right, so the resident state only. Okay. Does that, I think that was from Tina. Tina, does that answer your question? Thanks, Jeff.
Question.
Barbara,
and thank you, everybody, for coming piping in.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
So I just wanted to say we've had this come up recently. California has their own 1033 form and
Yes, they do.
requirements. Oregon does too, and theirs is really tough. You even have to get a carrier to sign off on that they're, announced, they're fine to operate. They attest to their character, etc. But if this is your first license, you may not even, have a relationship with a carrier or whatever. So that's tough. And it has to be, a certain officer or whatever. So some states will accept somebody else's 1033. There is kind of a uniform one that some states accept, but I think you have to send that to every state. I don't think submitting it to the resident state and the warehouse is sufficient unless you report it to all the states.
Yes, our friend Jeff from Washington has his hand up, so I wonder if you can answer that, Jeff.
I'll go back to the broader question. Is there anything being done toward uniformity on this process? Yes, there is a 1033 working group through the NAIC and the Producer Licensing Task Force that is looking into this. The issue is kind of state-based. I mean, Florida, as I noticed my good friend Paul brought up, Florida does their own, they don't issue one. So if you have a Florida resident that needs a 1033 and they're applying in your state, you can write it. Texas is also doing something unique where they're writing them only to apply to Texas. So it kind of depends on the jurisdiction that you're looking at. The best thing to do is to reach out to the regulators that you're looking to apply for to see what actually does and doesn't apply until some more guidance comes out from NAIC.
All right, does that answer the question at least, kind of, sort of?
Yeah, thanks. And Jeff, I'm excited to hear that there is some talk about the uniformity.
It seems like the 1033 waiver comes up on every single call. And it seems like the SACS group talks about it a lot as well. And California comes up a lot too.
Actually, believe it or not, they had the easiest one.
But they have their own background application questions as well, which is kind of why I said that when I was talking about background application questions. So not all of those are the uniform application, I know. But
thanks.
So, any other questions? I'm sorry that was such a whirlwind. I wasn't sure if we were going to end on time, and I didn't want to go too far over. So
you did an amazing job. And here's a question. Did something just come through? Let's see.
If a producer is licensed in a home state and satisfies the home state CE requirements, most states accept the non-resident requirement. So with NAPR, would I not allow, oops, sorry, I can't see what it says. Would it not allow the non-resident license to go through if something is missing? No. Well, the states would allow the non-resident requirement.
Producer.
First of all, this is producer, not adjuster. Just making sure. Yeah, producer. Yeah.
I think what they're asking is, if you don't have your CE in order in your home state, would NIPR block your non-resident application, or does it have the capability to even know that?
That's an NIPR question. I don't know if that's the case. Let's see, Amy, Thank you, Amy. You must be in good standing in your home state. All right, that's straight from NAPR. If you are not CE compliant, you would not be able to apply for non-resident license. Awesome, thanks.
So don't wait till the last 3 days to get your CE done.
Yeah, like nobody listens to that one.
All right, anything else? All right, well, guess what?
Hey, once again, just a plug, if you want, to have a deep relationship with producer licensing, you need to come to the SILA Basics, Producer Licensing Basics course, which is in August. I'll be teaching that one too. We don't have a date yet, but be on the lookout for that. That's 4 hours of fun.
Yes,
as much as this 1 hour was, yeah.
Yeah, and the registration for that will be open on April 30th, and it's open to both members and non-members. So even if somebody is not a SILA member, they can still come. So look around your area who needs to know more about producer licensing and encourage them to take this class. But Barb, really, thank you very much for taking your time to show us some fundamentals of producer licensing basics. This is a webinar that is free of charge, and it'll be open to the public. If you want to look at it in more detail, you will be able to find the link for that and share that with others. Have a wonderful rest of your afternoon. And for those of you who are very patient in awaiting the start of the webinar, we thank you. And for those of you who are getting a little impatient, I understand, because we were doing the same thing on this.
Sorry, we were flustered there for a minute. Sorry about that.
Yes, we were there. But thank you, everyone. And again, thanks again, Barb. Appreciate it.
Love it. Bye.